You are listening to the VBAC Link podcast, episode number 50. Today, we are talking with Jen, who prepared for a VBAC, but ended up with a repeat C-section because her baby was transverse. Now, guys, remember back in episode 40, we shared Janine's story, and we want to start making this more regular thing where we share cesarean stories because the reality is, 80 to 90% of women who try for a VBAC are going to be successful, but there's that other 10%. And sometimes you can prepare perfectly and do everything right. And like, if you could see me, I'm doing little quotations with my fingers, do everything right, and still end up with a repeat C-section. And so we want to start sharing stories like that so that we can help people who have that experience or had that experience and know that, VBAC after 2 C-sections, 3 C-sections, even 4 C-sections we've had on the podcast is possible. But before we get into the story, Megan has our review of the week.
Okay, so this week's review is from Bethany, and she left her review on Facebook, and she says, "This podcast is absolutely changing my life. My home birth turned cesarean and ICU stay has left me in place where I need to hear these stories." Thank you so much, Bethany, for leaving us that review. It really... Seriously, you guys, I know we say it a lot, but it really means a lot to us, and it makes us smile, and we love hearing that we are out there changing your lives.
Absolutely. And if you have a second to make our day, getting these reviews really makes our day. And so if you have a second, you can just hit the pause button and head over to Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you're listening on and give us a rating and leave us a review. If you don't know how to do that, go to the main page of the podcast, scroll all the way down to the bottom. There's 5 stars. Click it and it will give you a chance to leave us a rating. And they really do make our day. It's like super validating.
They do.
Like, oh, hey.
And we are going to be reading them on the podcast. So if you wouldn't mind leaving us a review, your review may be the next one on the podcast.
Absolutely.
You are tuned in to the VBAC Link podcast with Julie Francom and Megan Heaton, VBAC moms, doulas, and educators here to help you get inspired for birth after having a C-section. Together, they have created a robust VBAC preparation course along with this uplifting podcast for women who are preparing for their VBAC. Although these episodes are VBAC specific, they encourage all expectant moms to listen and educate themselves on how to avoid a cesarean from the get-go. The purpose of this podcast is to educate and inform. It is not meant to replace advice from any other qualified medical professional. Here are your hosts, Julie and Megan.
All right. Yes. We are here today with our friend Jen. And let me tell you a little bit about Jen. If there was ever a woman of strength, Jen is like the perfect picture of a strong woman. We connected on Instagram. I'm not even sure exactly how we got connected to each other, but I might have been stalking hashtags because I have been known to do that every once in a while. And we connected with her right at the end of her pregnancy, and she was having some struggles, and we were able to talk to her and connect with her and really reach her when she was in some vulnerable moments right before her baby was born. And we are so excited to hear her story today. And then after her story, we're going to share some tips about what you can do to help make sure that your baby is in optimal position before labor begins. So, Jen, would you like to introduce yourself and share your story with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really excited. I'm kind of nervous too, but we're going to go with it.
Don't be nervous.
Yes.
So, I'm Jen. I live in Massachusetts with my husband and our now 2 kids, which is still weird for me to say. We have a 2.5-year-old daughter named Isley, and our son, Lucas, is 5 weeks old. So it's all been very new and exciting, and I'm very much still in the process of what the heck am I doing? This was this crazy idea, kind of, things are going
We've
crazy.
totally been there.
Yep.
So I guess to start off, I like every story really with a VBAC story or a VBAC attempt story. There's a primary cesarean story. So really briefly, when I was pregnant with my daughter, so 2.5 years ago, it was my first pregnancy. We were able to conceive very quickly, actually, and it was a blessing. But I've struggled with anxiety and depression a lot in my past, so it kind of crept in a way that I wasn't expecting, and I basically was super anxious that entire pregnancy. So I literally could not enjoy anything about the pregnancy. I was like always afraid of miscarriage and then of other things happening down the line, and I was just a wreck the whole time. I was not in a positive headspace at all regarding, pregnancy. I didn't trust my body. I didn't trust, anything really. I was convinced something would happen that wouldn't be good. So that kind of led essentially to the decisions that led to me getting my first C-section, because when I was just so anxious the whole time that I couldn't even think about, what kind of birth I wanted. It was I just wanted a healthy baby. I just wanted the baby to be here and alive and, in my arms. So I didn't think that the birth really mattered, which is interesting, but I didn't think that at the time, I would probably say. But I ended up going, full term. So I was 40 days, that'd be great, 40 weeks and 1 day, and I went for my checkup. And I had I was seeing an OB. I should mention that too. Another thing I want to quickly say is we actually moved. So halfway through my pregnancy, actually, so I switched providers to one that I've been, referred to. And the provider that I chose was very calming, very kind. So I trusted him a lot, and I think he was a good match for that pregnancy. But that comes into play a little bit later. But so at 40 weeks and 1 day, I went in for my checkup thinking, okay, here's I just want labor to start. I was completely freaking out, just like, why isn't labor starting? Da 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 da. I'm huge. It was the middle of July, so I was literally in the heat wave of 95 degrees every single day. I was like, this is miserable. But long story short, I went in. Turns out that my baby was not head down at the time and was doing flips in my belly at 40 weeks pregnant. And I was like, what? Like, he was literally saying, oh, I can see her moving. Like, oh, now she's breech. Now she's transverse.
Oh, my God.
That's 40 weeks? Wow.
Yeah. Like, literally, I was watching her on the ultrasound, and he's like, oh, this is interesting. And that's all he said. And I was like, is it interesting? Like, are you kidding? So, of course, he's like, maybe you have a lot of fluid. So, of course, I went back, and because, unfortunately, I had a massive Googling problem when I was pregnant. I Googled everything. It's a terrible idea. And so I was Googling polyhydron, how do we say it?
Yeah, polyhydron, whatever. Yeah, too much fluid.
Exactly. And I thought, oh, that's what it is. And, of course, if you Google that, then there's all these horror stories. So I was completely freaking out. So we went back on Monday for a follow-up ultrasound and I wanted that for some reason. And then I was 40 weeks and 3 or 4 days. And basically he said, we can either induce you or we can get you scheduled for a C-section. And obviously I was like, I don't want a C-section because that's all I knew. I just didn't want a C-section. So he was like, well, why don't we try and induce you? So we scheduled an induction at 41 weeks, which was that Thursday. So I went and I was like, okay, let's do this. So of course to me, that's the first mistake that I made. Obviously, it's hard not to do the what if game, but for me, I look back and I'm like, oh, why? But long story short, we had an 8 a.m. induction date on that Thursday morning. And he said, okay, if the baby isn't head down, we can try and do an ECV, turn the baby, and then we'll just induce you right away. So we got to the hospital, and my baby was head down, which was amazing. We've been praying about it. We've been telling people to pray for it. So I was so excited. And I was like, oh, wow, vaginal birth's going to happen. And so then they brought me, we stayed in triage for a few hours and then eventually got a room, and they started the Pitocin at 11, I think it was around 11:30 in the morning. And I had so much fluid that I literally, they were starting the contraction, the Pitocin, and I could not feel anything. I just couldn't feel a thing. So,
wow.
For like 6 hours. And I was like,
goodness.
oh, this is great. I totally got this. Like, this is labor, whatever. And, you know, they were doing it they were coming every 5 minutes, etc. So at 5:30, my OB comes in and goes, well, why don't we break your water? So he broke my water. And he put internal monitoring in me because he had to, you know, make sure that the head was where it needed to be. Mm-hmm. And of course, when that happened, I got horrible contractions because the water was gone.
Yeah.
And it went from 0 to 60, and it was horrible. It was terrible. I just have vivid memories.
No lead in.
Yeah, exactly. And I just remember like totally swearing and being like, I'm so sorry, like in between contractions, and they were like, it's okay. But I went and, of course, wanted the epidural after that. So I got the epidural around 9:30. So looking back now, I did have 4 hours of Pitocin contractions, which was kind of crazy. I hadn't really realized it was that long.
Yeah.
But long story short, got the epidural. They checked me, and I was 4 to 5. Oh, I also wanted to mention when I first got to the hospital, I was 80% effaced and 3 centimeters dilated. So I was probably on my way to going into labor on my own.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's partly why I'm like, I wish so much. Anyway, there's no, you know, you can't do anything about it. But I really wish that I had not made that decision to induce. But regardless, so when they checked me at 9:30, I was 4 to 5 centimeters dilated. So they went ahead and did that, and I got the epidural, and then they said, okay, we'll come back in a few hours and we'll see how you progress. So I got some sleep, and, you know, they were trying to move me around, but they weren't doing a whole lot. I had the peanut ball, I think, but then at 1:30, they came in, and I was still at a 4 to 5. I still hadn't progressed past that, but my baby was starting to have non-reassuring heart tones, so they went ahead and basically, very long story short, said, okay, we need to do the C-section. So I was a hot mess for that C-section. I literally I was like, give me the drugs, I'm terrified. And they gave me those things, anti-anxiety drugs, so I was all zen, except for the fact that I hadn't realized it was going to make me so loopy. But so in my head, I'm like, oh, this is great. This is so fun. Like, you know, I was so hot. It was bad. But so for me, when I first met my daughter, there was definitely a disconnect there. I just kind of was like, oh, she's nice. Like, it was really strange, and it was really heartbreaking to not have this love that I had had for her so much in my belly that when she came out, I almost just didn't feel a thing. And that kind of happened or stayed that way for a few days and weeks after that. So that was really disappointing. But, you know, eventually things did get better. So leading into my next pregnancy, I got pregnant March of 2018, and we had been planning that we would have a second child within the next few months, but it was sort of like earlier than expected kind of surprise. So we were definitely, you know, excited, obviously, and I knew pretty much the moment I got pregnant, I'm like, things are going to be different this time, and I'm going to do everything I can to get the VBAC. And I basically was obsessed with it from day one. I started researching optimal positioning basically right away. Mm-hmm. I did all the things, basically. I was like, this is going to be a different pregnancy. The only thing I didn't really do differently, honestly, is I didn't change my nutrition all that much, which maybe should have done that, but I just didn't do that. So I don't know. That, you know, maybe that could have changed things. I also stuck with my same care provider, which, you know, he's great. He's a good OB. He is, or I've known to be very pro VBAC, pro, you know, natural birth within the community. However, there were still the, you know, as I went to different appointments with him, he did say things like, oh, well, we'll see, like, we'll give it a try, or we'll, you know, you gave it a go last time, but we'll see how it goes. And it was just kind of like, okay.
Yeah.
Like,
A little bit of
like
red
fine.
flag. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I should have, as time went on and I was reading more about providers and listening, especially to your podcast, I was like, ooh, there's just little things like that. Things like, he after some pressing, he did say that he would let me go to 42 weeks without doing anything, but he had scheduled a repeat C-section for the end of that time. So I was not happy with that, but whatever, fine. But I started to, especially as time went on, like I didn't recline on any sofas. I was sitting with my back, against the sofa.
I have been there.
Yeah. I was doing all the spinning baby, oh man, you should know, my brain's not working right now. But the sideline releases and just trying to just stay on all fours. It was crazy. And I was very uncomfortable, really, for most of the third trimester because of that. Yeah. I made my work get me an exercise ball to sit in because I work part-time, and they let me do that. So it was crazy. But I was so intent on doing it. I had 6 dates a day starting at 36 weeks. I was drinking red raspberry leaf tea. I was just doing everything. So again, and I was also a lot more calm in general this pregnancy, though. I was really praying a lot through it and, getting a lot of great support from my church community. And that was a huge difference than my first pregnancy. And so I really feel like that God really helped me to just stay more present with this pregnancy. So that anxiety that I had before was really not a factor, which was a very big blessing. But the crazy thing was that at 36 weeks, I did decline all cervical checks. So I told him right away, listen, I'm not getting checked, basically. I went in and said, I'm not doing it. And he was like, oh, okay. And I was a little bit firm and a little bit, but I was also I wasn't about to be, checked without him. I knew I didn't want that because it would just mess with my head. And I would get freaked out, and I'd be thinking about everything. And so I had no idea how dilated or how not dilated I was, because I knew it didn't mean anything. So he had 34 weeks. He was like, oh, it looks like your baby's sort of transverse breech. And I was like, oh, great. That's fabulous. Are you serious right now? So I went back and did the breech till and, did all that. Came back 2 weeks later, and the baby was, at least from palpation, was head down at that point. And then he didn't really check via palpation until the next few weeks. But I would feel these really big movements, and I just didn't really know what was going on. But I just figured, but I had a lot more pressure, and I had a lot more discharge and stuff going down there. So I thought, things have to be different this time. So I went and basically at 38 weeks and 6 days, it was a Thursday night or a Wednesday night. I had been at home, and I really hadn't felt the baby move at all for hours. And I got really, really worried, obviously. At that point, it really had been hours. So I ended up going to the hospital to get checked out. And, of course, thank goodness, everything was fine. But they found out there that he was breech. So they were just like, oh, he's breech. I'm so sorry. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there sobbing my eyes out because I was like, I'm not going to have a C-section. I'm not doing this. I was literally, and I was also by myself because my husband was home with my daughter who would sleep in the middle of the night. So it was rather dramatic, and they probably thought I was this crazy, person, because apparently the next day they sent a long email to my OB. Yeah. Well, they sent an email. They're like, she was a little bit upset. I was like, great. But I was I was so just my heart was so set on it. But so they're like, well, we can try an ECV. So the next day I went back to do an ECV, and he was still breech when we got there. So they did the terbutaline, and they,
I remember talking to you during this.
Yeah.
Yep.
We were messaging all through this.
It was crazy. Yes, because I don't know why I thought, I can just talk to them, but I was like, I can't think of anyone else to talk to.
No, we're so glad you turned to us.
Well, and I had my other friends too. They were probably like, what's wrong? Why are you messaging? Anyway, it was crazy. But I was at the ECV and everything was, I was so nervous, and they had got the turbulin shot in me, and he was literally about to turn him, and he put his hands on my belly, and my baby was like transverse with his head on my right side, and he flipped like literally a second before he was about to do it. And they were all like, oh, he's head down. And I thought they were joking. I literally was like, haha. They were like, no, he really is head down. He's like, so, it was, everyone was cheering. Everyone was excited. We had prayed right before. And so my OB was like, oh, maybe it was that prayer that did it. I was like, yeah, probably was actually. But he was head down. So I was like, good. So that was 38 weeks and that was 39 weeks actually. So I was all ready to go after that in my head. So time went on. I did have a doula. Also, I wanted to mention that. I don't think I did, but I did have a doula this time. So she was there as well, which was really helpful.
Yeah.
But at 39 weeks, that was that. And I had a feeling / was planning on the baby being overdue anyway, just because that's what happened last time. So I wasn't as surprised this time when my due date came and went, although I was insanely, my hormones were just so out of whack, but I was so convinced the baby was not going to come on his own. I knew that he had to come on his own, and I was just a wreck, which is one of the other times that I reached out to you guys, and I'm slightly embarrassed about that.
Yeah, no, I remember that.
I was like,
it's so real. Like everybody, I think, has that moment. So many women do. You are definitely not alone.
It's just crazy. You think, and there's nothing quite like it, especially after the due date when people are, when do you do? And, all of my friends that have been pregnant ever since, I just don't ask them that. And I'm just like, let's let you know, I'm not going to bother you, but you're doing a great job. It's going to be okay. Because it's like, no one told me about the craziness that is going over your due date. And I was literally crying one moment and at peace the next, and it was just crazy. But at 40 weeks and 2 days, I walked the mall with my doula. We walked, like laps and laps, it seemed. And I'd gone to a reflexology appointment that morning, kind of out of desperation, because I was like, I'm going to try something. This is ridiculous. And I'd also been, I don't know if you follow or have heard of Mama Natural, but I'm sure you guys probably have. She has a recipe for Labor Day tea.
Yeah.
So I think I was drinking that, which I think is like, it was like something like 4 cups of water to 1 cup of loose leaf raspberry leaf tea. And so I was drinking that. It was gross, but I was like, I'm going to chug this down. And I kept on throwing it up because my baby clearly didn't like it. But that's okay. And I still did it. I was like, you're coming out. Like, it doesn't mean anything. But nothing seemed to happen. The reflexology, nothing happened right after that. Nothing really happened after the mall. But I really just was hoping I would go into labor on my own. And I remember my mom was here at the time, and my husband and I were like eating s'mores that night. And I remember just being like, oh, whenever it happens, it's going to happen. I just sort of let it go, of course. So at 3:00 in the morning, the next day at 40 weeks and 3 days, I woke up, and I remember waking up and being like, okay, I'm just going to pray that this baby comes today. So I prayed. And 5 minutes later, I had a contraction.
Oh, wow.
Your prayers are powerful.
Yeah. It was, at first I was like, oh, what is this? Because it felt different than my Braxton Hicks, which I've been having. But I was like, oh, it's fine. And then I had another one, and it was still pretty sporadic, but they would start in my lower back, and they would be mainly in my lower back, but some in my abdomen. But I remember feeling that these are different. They're banding around instead of just not. But they were very inconsistent. So they would go from, 5 minutes to 12 minutes to 15, back to 7. Even that early on. And I thought that was odd, but I just sort of let it go. And that sort of happened all morning. I remember my daughter woke up actually crying at one point around 5 o'clock, which is not normal for her. But she ended up in our bed, and it was actually really sweet. It's a really nice memory that I have, actually. She was lying next to me, and we were just talking about something, and she had held my hand, and then I had a contraction, and it was a pretty intense one even at that time. And I remember just feeling like, wow, this is a crazy experience to be contracting like with my daughter here. It was just weird, but it was a beautiful thing. And I was really amazed and excited that I was actually going into labor on my own, that my body knew what to do and that it was doing it. And I was just convinced. I'm like, this is going to happen. It's going to happen. They petered it out a little bit. And so throughout that morning, I ended up taking a nap. I ate a giant breakfast because I was like, I'm going to eat. I'm going to make sure I'm nourished. And I had been hoping to have a completely unmedicated vaginal birth this time. So I, was preparing for that. And I wanted to stay home as long as possible. So we went to Target. We're walking around Target. I have to start leaning over on the Target counters. I literally got stairs. It was pretty awesome. But I didn't think at the time, maybe I should be, wondering about this. I literally wasn't thinking that. So I just kept on laboring. And then I went to the chiropractor that evening around 4:30, and she did another adjustment because I didn't mention that either, but I was also doing the Webster technique every week. So she went and did the final adjustment, and I said, I'm in labor. I really hope this gets things started. She's like, yeah, it probably will. And in my head, I think I was thinking, probably won't, but nice of you to say that. Well, at 4:45, as I was leaving, I noticed that they were definitely getting more intense. And even as I got to the chiropractor, I was having to start swaying through them. And the hilarious thing was that there was the waiting room was full of these big burly dudes. It happened to be that day. And so I literally at one point was swaying, and they probably were like, what? And I didn't, I wasn't necessarily moaning or anything, thank gosh, at that point. But it was I must have looked really funny because I remember not being able to stand on my feet, on the soles of my feet. And so I kind of had to tiptoe around, and I think they were like, that's weird. But anyway, after I came back from the chiropractor, we had dinner. I had been calling my doula at the time and been like, I don't know, they're getting really strong. They're over a minute because they were at that point when I got back from dinner around 4:30, 5 o'clock, or from the chiropractor, they were at least 60 seconds long and getting very intense. But they weren't 5 minutes apart. And my doctor had said, wait till they're 5 minutes apart. So I was like, oh, well, they're not 5 minutes apart. I still have forever. I'm probably not even dilating yet. So I had gotten some bloody show as well. And then so at least that made me feel like, okay, we actually are in labor here. We had dinner. It was some soup, I think. And then we went out to just relax, and we watched some episodes of The Office. So it's my favorite show. So we were like, okay, we'll just watch The Office. It will be totally, get my mind off things. And I think we got maybe halfway through one episode, and I started having they were so intense. If my husband was not putting counter pressure on my back, the moment a contraction started, I would flip out. So it was all on my back. I was having pretty much entirely back labor. It was horrible. And they were really, really long. So they were between 60 to 90 seconds and very intense, but then they'd be very inconsistent in terms of time or frequency. So long story short, my doula came after I talked to her, and she said, okay, well, why don't I come over? So she finally came over. But from the time that she left to the time that she got to my house, it was about 20 minutes. And around 9:30-ish, my husband was basically frantically packing the hospital bag. It was so funny. He's a really calm, really supportive guy, but he was literally just throwing things as we went. And I was like, why are you freaking out? We're probably not even going to have this baby today. He was like, what are you talking about? Like, we're having the baby. And he was telling me, like, right before my doula got there, he's like, I don't care if, she's not here. We need to go to the hospital right now, because I was in very visible physical pain. I was swearing a lot and screaming, and it was, my mother had a C-section with me, and so she was sitting there ooh. We don't have any idea what to do. Long story short, we decided to go to the hospital around 9:30, so right when my doula got there. So she got there, and then we went to the hospital. And as we were going, they suddenly became every 4 minutes. And it was very sudden, and it was 4 minutes, and they were very intense. So we got to the hospital. I literally burst out of the elevator into labor and delivery in the middle of a giant contraction. So I was like that lady that it was actually really satisfying to go in and have that experience. But I still thought, I'm probably, barely anything. I barely dilated last time. What are the odds? And my doula was like, yeah, I really think you're further along than you think you are. And I was like, oh, no, whatever. There's no way. So we get to triage, and I had not been checked, of course, my entire pregnancy. So this resident came in, or I think she was a resident, and she was just like, okay, we're going to check you, blah, blah, blah. Do you know if your baby is head down? And I think I knew, for some reason, I think I just knew. The moment she asked that question, I just had this feeling that I was like, oh, I think so. And she's like, you think so? And I was like, yeah, well, I kind of have babies that have unstable lie. They just kind of flipped from position to position. So I don't actually know. So they're like, okay, let's get the ultrasound. So anyway, in the meantime, she went and checked me. And I guess when I was there, right before she checked me, I was having monster contractions. And I remember I was leaning over the triage bed, and the nurse had asked me, do you feel like you have to go to the bathroom? And I thought it was a weird question. And I was like, no, not really. And she was like, do you feel pressure? I'm like, yes, I feel pressure, but I don't feel like I have to go to the bathroom. And, she was watching me very carefully, and I didn't really understand at the time. But then when the resident came in, she checked me, and she said, well, you're 8 centimeters. And I literally was like, what? Like, yeah, you made it to 8 centimeters all on your own. I can't believe you did that. And I was like, I nearly said, well, of course I did that. That's what we're supposed to do. But I didn't say that. I was like, well, I was so excited. And then she said, but, we need to check the position of your baby. And there's an ultrasound. And I remember there was this pause. My husband and my doula were just staring at the ultrasound. I kind of was looking at it, but I couldn't really see anything. And they said that, after a while, she said, well, your baby is transverse. And I think in my head, I was like, well, that's fine. We can try and turn him. In my head, I at first I didn't go immediately to panic mode, but she was so blasé about it. She literally said, oh, he's transverse. I'm so sorry. I think it's a C-section. And I was like, no, that's not going to work. I'm going for my VBAC. And she's like, yeah, I understand that you want a vaginal birth, but I just really don't think we should. And then I was just getting really overwhelmed. But they had the attending physician come in, and she basically talked to me about it. And I was sobbing at this point. But basically, they were afraid of my water breaking because I was at 8 centimeters, and if my water had broken, it's really possible that there could have been a cord prolapse. At least that's what they were worried about. So I did agree to the C-section at that point. I do often wonder if maybe they could have offered to turn him in the operating room, but I didn't ask at the time, obviously. I continued to have horrible contractions. I'm pretty sure I went into transition at that time. While they're trying to put an IV in me, they had to try twice because the first one blew out. It was horrible. But I eventually got all set, and then they said, okay, well, do you want to wheel to the operating room? I said, no, I'm walking. And I told them, oh, and I want skin to skin. Can you please arrange that for me? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I'm like, yeah, can you please arrange that for me? And they're like, oh, okay. And they did. But I walked myself to the OR, and because I didn't want to feel like I wanted to remain in control of this birth.
Yeah.
So I walked in, and I sat myself on the table and, got the spinal block and everything, and was just talking with it was really weird. It was a lot calmer than my previous experience, obviously. And I told them I wanted to be very alert and awake, and so they went ahead, and he was born at 11:27 on December 10th. And I was able to see him. The lady with the on-call OB was actually really kind. She knew I wanted to see him right away, so she did lower the drape. I was able to get him on my chest. I couldn't really maneuver the skin-to-skin part, but at least he was on my chest.
Yeah.
And he wasn't taken away from me like my daughter had been for a little bit. So that was a really good experience in terms of, that. The physical pain kind of the C-section, the recovery was a little bit better as well. But I felt very at peace at the time. It was only the next day that I completely sort of lost it and was like, wait a minute, I didn't get what I had dreamed of for so long. And so now, ever since then, I remember just being, and so I'm still now, things like I left a lot of my VBAC support groups on Facebook because I couldn't see all the success stories. They were really hard for me to see. Pampers commercials, if I see a Pampers commercial, I have to look away. I'm 5 weeks out. I'm still pretty early on, so I know it's going to be a long time to process. My husband and I haven't necessarily said that we're done having babies, so there is definitely a chance that we'll have a third. But if we do, it will be several years from now, not only because I want to heal physically, but also emotionally.
Yeah.
So it's just been a crazy ride. I mean, I had so many ups and downs, especially the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me not to think, why do I keep on having this unstable lie issue? Does my body make too much fluid? Are my abdominals all lax? Like, do I have to be more in shape or something? Like, I don't know. I'm a pretty small person. I'm 5 feet tall. So the fact that I have this issue, and I also have larger babies. My daughter was 8'6", and my son was 7'7". So they're not tiny. They're not giant babies, but
No.
for a 5 feet tall girl, it's pretty big. So especially for them to have so much space to move, like that's the craziest part.
Yeah.
So it's just been a really hard situation, and at the same time, I can have, I do have some perspective on it now. Obviously, like I can't believe that my water never broke that whole time, even through transition. It never broke, which is incredible because they were just, with every contraction, everyone was just waiting, because if that had been the case, I would have been knocked out. So I really obviously didn't want that to happen. And I have gotten a lot of you should have a healthy baby, blah, blah, blah. So I get that a lot from a lot of very well-meaning people.
Of course you do, yeah.
And, it's true, of course, but it's every person who's ever had a C-section, it's like really not the best thing to hear all the time, obviously. And it is so hard to try and explain that. And I had to explain that even to my husband, who he was very supportive and was disappointed as well, of course. But he was just like, well, he's healthy and you're healthy. And I was like, okay, but no one seems to be understanding that part, that it sucks that I didn't get this. And, because I have perspective now, it probably sounds like I'm a lot more at peace with it than I really am. I think I am very much still in the grieving process.
Yeah.
But I guess I would just want to tell anyone who's had this happen, where they've had a CBAC, so a cesarean birth after cesarean, that they're still obviously a strong, like you're saying, you're still a strong mother, you're still a strong woman, and it's not, we've all been there, having a choice of getting cut open is a very difficult, and it's crazy, really, when you think about it. But I think I wanted, I don't know, it's really hard to put it into words, but I feel like it's a unique grief to try to go for something like a VBAC and not get it, especially because there is such a high success rate. There, it's easy to be like, what's wrong with me? What could I have done differently, etc.
Yeah.
But I guess I would want to tell whoever is struggling with this or who's gone through this that you're not alone, and that I totally understand, and that, there's still, even if I don't have any other children, which I hope I do, it's not easy for me to think about not having any more children actually right now. I really want to keep that door open, because I think for me that's hard to even go to, I can't even go there emotionally, but knowing that it's all part of our stories, and I'm very grateful I was able to go into labor on my own. That was a huge part of it. So, yeah, I'm sorry. That went way longer than I thought it was.
No, you're fine.
It's great. As you're finishing your story, there's just so much going through my mind, because I have been there. I was that mom that walked down to the OR for the second time, and and it was hard. And I also got the, as long as you're healthy, as long as baby's healthy, which we know is the ending goal. And really it does matter, right? We want everyone healthy and happy, but that didn't change the way I felt inside. So I just remember, I was just kind of reflecting back as you're telling your story. I was like, yep, I have literally been there. And it is hard, and it is a process. And I remember also, in my VBAC groups, wanting to say so badly, I did it, and had to say, I ended in a repeat cesarean. And that was really hard for me. And I found myself kind of wanting to, for a little bit, kind of discontinue my following of those groups. But, I was actually just in an interview the other day with a client, and telling, she asked me why I became a doula. And I was telling her, I did have these 2 cesareans, but I'll tell you what, it made me to be the person that I am today. I wouldn't be here right now with Julie sitting here talking to you on this podcast if I didn't have those 2 cesareans. And so although they weren't ideal births, the births that I desired, I am so grateful for my beautiful babies. And I am grateful for the journey that it has brought me on, because it's an amazing one. And I'm so proud of you for sharing your story and your vulnerabilities, because like I said, I remember I was there, and it is hard, but to all the women who have had multiple cesareans and had to have that situation where you're like, oh, this is not what I wanted, you are women of strength, and you are powerful, and we love you.
I just think it's important to point out too that you can be so happy that you have a healthy baby, and you can also be sad and mourn the loss of a birth experience that you worked so hard for. And those 2 emotions are not mutually exclusive, and they're really complicated. And sometimes it's like a messy place to be in, because you feel guilty for feeling sad. And then sometimes you feel guilty for feeling happy. And you're right, Jen, you said it, you're in the grief process right now, and it's true. You have to follow that flow and let yourself feel all those emotions, and not limit yourself to one of them, because happiness and the sense of loss and the feeling of loss, they can exist together.
Yes.
And it's important to remember that. And we talked about it in an earlier episode, about the book, How to Heal a Bad Birth. And if we recommend this to like every mom who's had a cesarean or had a birth that didn't go the way they wanted it to. It is amazing. So you can buy it on Amazon. We don't get like any commission or kickback for referring this book. We just really think it's amazing. So if you have some trauma, make sure that you read that book, because it is truly inspiring and also effective. I wanted to just talk a little bit about making sure that your baby, or that you're encouraging your baby to be in a great position before labor starts. And you know what, guys? Jen did like everything. I mean, if you go back and listen to her story again, maybe you already caught it, or maybe you're taking notes, because I feel like I was like writing things down to make sure I didn't miss whatever I, remember. But she talked about, chiropractic care is so important to make sure that your spine and your skeletal frame is in proper alignment so everything can work effectively. She talked about having good posture, sitting on birth balls, that slouching over that like we all do. We're like sitting on a couch watching Netflix, eating a bowl of chocolate ice cream. I mean, hypothetically here. You're getting in that comfortable position and you're slouching over. She talked about, going in and checking baby's position and doing the techniques from spinning babies and the Miles circuit in order to encourage baby to be head down and in an anterior position. Walking is a great way to encourage those hips to open and get that relaxin hormone working together too. And you guys, there are so many great things in Jen's story that can help get that baby in a great position. And a lot of times they work, but sometimes for whatever reason, they don't. And it can feel really defeating to not get something that you worked so hard for. And so Megan and I, we are here for you. We want you to feel free to message us on Instagram. You can email us info@thevbaclink. You can contact us through our website, thevbaclink.com. And I just want to throw a little shout out for our VBAC preparation classes and our VBAC doula certification program that you can find at thevbaclink.com as well. Those will all help you prepare. But like I said, sometimes it's just bad luck. Sometimes it's just bad luck. And Jen, you did nothing wrong. And I know that it's really easy to look back and feel like you did or do the what ifs, what if I did this? What if I didn't do that? But, it is what it is. And you said that during your story, and it's not your fault. It is not your fault. And I wish for you to have as many more babies as you want. And I want to stay connected with you, and we want to keep updated of your journey as well. And we love you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. We really do love you, and we've loved being a part of your journey. And, that day that the baby flipped all on his own, we were like, yes. We were over here cheering with you. So we appreciate you. We love you. And congratulations on your sweet baby boy.
Yes, he's so cute.
Thank you so much.
Interested in sharing your VBAC? Head over to thevbaclink.com/share to submit your story. For information on all things VBAC, including online and in-person VBAC classes, the VBAC blog, and Julie and Megan's bios, head over to thevbaclink.com. Congratulations on starting your journey of learning and discovery with the VBAC Link.